1611. All right, there we go. You gonna use some carbon arrows? There you go. That's a nice set for you. This have real feathers on it too. My preference. There you go. Alright, this is for radish and some soybeans and a chair and some sunflowers as well. 1657. 1657. 1657. Alright, bring it on over here. Alright, I'm going to draw it twice on these hooks. First guy gets his choice which hook he wants. And if he wants a QDMA hat. I got 12. Oh wait. Oh wait.
Yeah, I see the one is me and Brisley and Mr. Hexon. Along the way, this is the first station. I'll be presenting some concepts at this station. Most of the tour is going to be done by Terry Bishop and his brother Greg. We're going to stop along the way. We're going to hear about ponds and warm season grasses from Dan Timmons. And we're also going to meet up with Ed Spinazzola back on some destination food plots at the back. And he'll talk to you about how to set up your gun setups for the food plots and how he arranges that. And he's got a new CD on that subject as well that you can buy. It's for sale up here. His wife Pat has them. And he's donating $5 from each sale to the Bishop family. So please dig deep in your pockets and you'll learn a lot from Ed. What I want to show you right here is perfect deer habitat. This right here is what perfection is. You've achieved perfection when you get this. I've met so many people that buy a property and they have old field growth like this. This is what would happen if you let an old field grow up the way I was talking about earlier in the tent. Just let it go. Over a number of years you'll get bushes, you'll get forbs growing up, and you've created the best deer habitat in the world. Now a lot of these plants that you see in here were planted by Scott, but you don't necessarily have to do that. You can just let an old field go. I hear from so many people, they come in, they buy a 20-acre property, they got a brushy area like that, and they'll come in and they'll mow 5 acres of it, and then they call my friend Jake Illinger up, and they say, I want you to come out and do a habitat plan. And then the first thing he tells them is you got to wait 5 years to recover your property. Deer need cover, cover, and cover in that area. And that's what you'll find as you walk through this property. What Scott Bishop has created here is a wonderland of cover. Deer do not want to walk out in open spaces. People make these 2, 3, 4, 5 acre plots because they see them on TV down in Texas. They got a ranch that only one hunter for 100 square miles is hunting, and they see these big bucks coming out. They will not come out in a 5 acre plot in daylight in most areas of Michigan. What you'll see Scott has created is cover like this, perfect deer habitat. We're going to leave here and we're going to walk into a woods here and you're going to see a little Y-shaped food plot. Scott created that food plot over here. If you look at this food plot, we're going to come into it like this, and it's going to go out in 2 Ys like that, and it's completely surrounded by cover like this. A mature buck, 5.5 years old, will use a plot like that at midday. He feels safe going in there. You know why? He's 2 jumps from complete cover. He will never ever be seen in Michigan unless he's just got crazy hormones going on. He will never be seen in a 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 20-acre field, but he'll be seen in that. My friend Jake Illinger got shots of a 150 class buck in a little plot like this 3 days in a row between 12 o'clock and 12:05 during gun season. Wow. That's what you can create. The other thing Scott's done with this food plot here, he's sucking the deer to the house. I see so many little properties like this. This is a 40-acre property, and the guys are leaving their house and they're walking back to the back fence row, disrupting every single deer in the area because hardly anybody has cover like this. If you have a homestead like this, you get cover like this, you can go in there and you can make 5 1/10 acre food plots in there. You sit up there in those windows in that house and you'll watch mature deer out here using them in daytime. This is perfection. So carve those little teeny food plots out, 2 jumps to cover, suck them into your house. Don't walk through your property. use the food to suck the deer up to your house, and then you want to have a wind blowing right straight from the house because they smell that 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, and you can sit back here and shoot a deer. Mike Hart just, his best stand on his property is 40 yards from his trailer on his property, and he has video of a booner buck several years ago walking up past that stand. He's taking the video from inside his place. So that's what he's created, something very much like Scott has. So if you don't get anything else out of this day, look at this cover right here, and when you see that on your property, you know you have perfection. Any questions about, this is old field. Any questions about that? Okay, we're going to lead the group. We'll walk through this food plot, and then we're going to stop by some ponds back in here, and Dan Timmons will talk to you about pond programs. But I heard in Greg's reading, Scott talked about the importance of water, and he's produced the water here that the deer need as well. So let's walk briskly in this direction. Of why a mature buck would want to use this space. Because he's in cover, completely surrounded by cover. So I'm going to repeat that spiel about 15 times. Terry's going to take it in the next station.
He's got areas way back in here where he's got literally channels that are probably 4 or 5 foot deep that come in, and they bottleneck. So the deer that are in there have to go through the bottleneck. That's been real successful. The area I'm gonna be talking a lot about is the doe bedding area, which happens to be the best bedding area on the property. And then I'll get through that, and we're going to go back into the autumn olives and talk about that a little bit. I just don't know where my pond expert is right now.
Did you say these willows were natural? Or
yeah, these are all volunteer. I mean, I don't want to say that Scott didn't plant any willows. I would imagine he started planting some, but he didn't plant this many. These are just volunteer, and this is what Jim keeps talking about. This is no matter where you look on this property, this is what you see. The stem density is tremendous. I mean, the big bucks feel real comfortable. And the number of sightings that Scott has seen of racks going like this through the brush with his bow is incredible. But he just, connecting, that's the key. You gotta connect with these big guys.
Talking about this pond?
The ponds, yeah.
Yeah, I think these were done on Fish and Wildlife Service projects that Scott had engaged the Fish and Wildlife through the partners.
You're gonna have to be louder.
Through the Partners in Fish and Wildlife program. And what they typically do to restore these wetlands, and a place like this is ideal for it, it's a place with a high water table, is most of this ground in this area, whether it's woods or not, once upon a time was cropland. You may see these big towering trees, but there's a real good chance it was cropland. And there are old drain tiles underground everywhere out here, and one of the things that they do when a wetland is restored like this, they go in with their equipment, a backhoe or hydro hoe or whatever, and they tear out the old drain tiles, which are usually old, they're usually clay. I've seen them made out of iron also, but once they take those drain tiles out, they can then use the equipment, establish a berm, which we're standing on here, and a scheme based upon the assumed direction in which the water wants to flow, and voila, a wetland is created. Now, one of the fascinating things that occurred here, and I had the same experience in the wetlands I've had performed on my property under the same program, is here you're dealing with old farm ground. These were row crops that were growing here, and they were row crops that grew for generations. And once you stop farming it and you establish this wetland, all of a sudden these seeds that had been in the seed bank and had been dormant in some cases for over 100 years, it's like they show up out of nowhere, and all of a sudden you'll have these reeds and you'll have these sedges and all of these other wetland plants. Cattails will show up, although those are more frequently brought in by critters. But there's just a variety of swamp milkweed and swamp marigold, and all these wetland plants will show up that hadn't been there in a century. and you create the conditions, you stop farming it, and it's like it's a magic that these plants appear out of nowhere, and they create tremendous diversity, which is appealing to all kinds of wildlife creatures that are interested in eating and hiding in those different kinds of wetland plants. It's interesting to deer and, of course, to waterfowl and raccoons and skunks and other desired species. Any questions?
So there's no creek that's feeding this or anything. This is all just
No,
watershed,
no, but you know, in any kind of a groundwater, people say it's stagnant. Well, it's really not stagnant. All water has a direction that it moves in, whether it's on the surface or whether it is underground. It is moving in a direction. And when you got an area that's got a high water table, you don't have to go down very far till you get to water. And now sometimes if you've got real light soil, if you got a lot of sand, you can't do these kinds of projects because it just won't hold the water. But it still will hold some water if you have a high water table. And my sense is, from just walking around here, we do have a high water table here. Yes, sir.
Two comments. Just, I think these are defined as a shallow water
Mhm.
pond. A lot of people think of ponds as something to look at, but this is all about shallow and habitat. And then I know that Scott talked a lot about his strategy here for moving deer around these things, using them as obstacles to help create movement and structure on this piece of property.
Right.
Maybe you could talk a little about
Right. Well, first of all, these are shallow water ponds, as opposed to a fish pond, and that's one of the ways you distinguish them. A shallow water pond is seasonally wet, and during peak drought conditions, there may not be that much water in them. And as to their shape, I know this is kind of a right angle here, this particular wetland. Some are more irregular in shape, and they do steer deer movement. My wetlands tend to be very irregular in shape, and their size and dimensions can vary from year to year. And usually, you will see around the perimeter of that wetland, you'll see where deer trails will develop around the perimeter. And depending upon how wet the year is, they may appear in a different place than they did in a wet year as opposed to a dry year. And in fact, some of my woodland swamps are full of a plant called buttonbush that if in a real dry year, the deer will bed right in that buttonbush. And buttonbush is a superb plant for wood ducks, because wood ducks, when there's water in there, they can swim around to their heart's content, and that buttonbush protects them from predators, you know, hawks and owls and whatever else, so can prey on wood ducks. But in this case, you've got this right angle, and you're going to be steering deer movement typically around the perimeter of it. The deer will go right through the middle of it, but especially if they're disturbed. But left to their own devices, I tend to think that they're lazy, and they'll tend to skirt around the water, and they're not making as much noise if they're skirting around the water too. One of the neat things about hunting around a shallow water area too.
When we get to the back of the property, Scott
Yeah.
also he's got channels cut where he's doing exactly with what you're saying. Where he's got it all bottlenecked down, so like in the big buck bedding area, the last part, you'll see there's water there, you know, and the water gives the deer a sense of safety. He can look across the water, he knows predators are not coming at him, so he does use, you know, the channels to bottleneck the deer, and it works out really well.
With that in mind,
Cottonwoods voluntary.
I was starting to say, one of the neat things about hunting near a shallow water wetland area, in addition to the fact that you're going to be typically observing more wildlife than you may be observing in another location, some of those times when you're in your stand and you're kind of like dozing off, and it's a still day, all of a sudden you hear that little splash, 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 and it may very well alert you to some deer moving in on you that you otherwise would not have been aware of. It's kind of a cool sound. You know how it is when you hear a deer crunching in.
And it's not just that. It's like I've got these on my land, and you know I see ducks.
Yeah.
I see muskrats. I get cattails that grow up around mine, and in the wintertime, the bucks will bed in those cattails. they offer so much more, just the little things that you don't even really know you appreciate until you put a pond in like this. Sometimes you put them in, you think, oh, why'd I dig a big hole full of water because I got a stream a half mile away. There's so many benefits to these ponds that you can't even count.
Excellent.
One benefit, Dan mentioned this, everything that's surrounding us right now is natural regrowth. The cottonwood trees back towards the pond and all these willow trees, they were here in the soil. If you look down at the ground among people's feet here, these plants are going to be 4 feet tall this summer. There's goldenrods there, and these things are going to grow up and create wonderful cover. And this is all natural. He didn't have to plant anything in here. All he had to do is dam it up and let the water build up. And that produces cottonwoods. Anywhere there's standing water, you're going to get cottonwoods and willows.
Another thing about cattails, which are excellent winter cover also, for deer also. If you have a shallow water wetland area and you do not have cattails in it, that is one of the easiest plants to establish on your own. Just go and gather some cattail seed heads from another site that are kind of dried out, and just go out when it's frozen in the winter and walk around the perimeter and just kind of shake that box and shake all of those cattail seeds out. I've done it twice and I'm batting 1,000. The perimeter of the wetlands that I've done that in, the very next year I had young cattails around the perimeter. In the following years, they took over like they were autumn olive.
Dan, how deep were your ponds?
Well, that's a good question. How deep were they? At the maximum depth, well, the minimum depth is 1 millimeter or something like that when you get close to the perimeter, but maximum depth probably at high water, probably 5 feet, something like that.
If you have a pond that's, a couple feet deep, and then put cattails in it, and then later on, if you get a drought in the summertime and it goes down, those cattails will go all the way to the middle. So if you want to have a pond that doesn't have cattails in the middle, make sure you got a deeper water area, otherwise the cattails.
It's hard to imagine if you don't have experience with these warm season grasses how different this site looks like now as to what it will look like, 3 months from now, because I imagine, not having ever been here before, but I can well imagine these grasses are wall to wall and about this high.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. This is just an absolute beautiful plot. It's nothing like what you see here. Nothing.
And another neat thing is how it changes over the course of the year. It's almost like wheat. If you took a time-lapse photo as these things go through the growing season, the color of it changes a little bit every day, and until it turns yellowish and reddish, and some of the blue stems even turn kind of purplish color. But here I imagine we've got some Indian grass and probably big blue stem growing in here.
This actually looks like little blue stem.
Except it's taller than little blue stem.
I know, it seems like it should be here.
Yeah.
But it looks like it.
Yeah.
Indian grass is going to have that turkey head.
The warm season grasses really have not begun to grow yet. They don't really take off and start making some growth in this latitude till probably in June. Now there's probably some that are springing up and sticking their heads up above the soil right now, but predominantly the green stuff you see here is you see some young goldenrod, some cool season grasses. I've got a red maple here. I've got, of course, the speckled alder. And you ever do any burns in here?
Yeah, we've done quite a few burns actually.
Yeah, burning is a great way to rejuvenate these warm season grass stands. They generally recommend you burn about every 5 years or so, and I got some grasses on my place that are really overdue. I meant to burn them this year, but never got around to it. And burning it will not only, because after a period of time, you'll get a mat of vegetative, dead grasses that's there that kind of retards the grass growth a little bit. And that year you burn it, they just take off like crazy. And the other thing the burning will do for you, it will control the invasion of woody vegetation like this red maple and the speckled alder and this aspen right here. Burning it will kill them. Yes?
How do you control, with this being so closed in, how do you control it, the burn? I mean, what method do you use?
You got to use somebody that's skilled in doing a burn. I'm not one of them. The best way to do it is to establish some kind of a burn break around the perimeter of the grass stand by mowing. If you mow it somewhat periodically, you'll get green stuff, cool season grasses or whatever. Some guys are really gung-ho will actually plant clover or bird's foot trefoil or something like that that stays green around it. And that's kind of a safety barrier when you do conduct your burn, providing you do your burn after those things do green up in the spring. Doing a burn is something for guys that have got a little bit of experience. I've done some of it, but I've also done enough of it to have a great deal of respect for the process. I've been in had some of those nervous moments where all of a sudden the wind changed 180 degrees and the fire was going the wrong way. So you want to use someone that's got some experience at it. Typically in most areas, there's a legal requirement that you get a permit in advance of conducting the burn. I leave that to the discretion of the landowner. The last time I did it that way, it would have been cheaper for me to do it on my own and pay the fine when they caught me, because it was that big of a pain in the ass for me to get the permit issued. And then there was a whole list of, oh, you must do it between these hours and do this, do that, otherwise we're going to come and incarcerate you. But I've done it on the QT since then. But use someone that's somewhat experienced. The last time I did a major burn, I hired some guys that did it, that had they had all of these bright yellow suits that they wore, and they had the spray tank with some kind of flame retardant chemical that was in their tank mix, and it was really, that was much more enjoyable to participate as a spectator, because there's a little bit of pyromaniac in all of us. And when it gets to that point where your back burn is completed and you just let it go, well, you could sell tickets to something like that. That's better than the fireworks show at the 4th of July. 35-foot tall flames, and seconds later is a puff of smoke and nothing but black smoldering ground where there once was a bunch of combustible material. And
I burned a 14-acre field of switchgrass that was this tall, and I went to the local fire department and they said, what was my burn plan? I said, light a match and run. And they didn't like that, obviously. But what they ended up doing, they got like 4 fire departments, all came together. I had 70 guys with backpack sprayers.
Wow.
And it was kind of a joke in a way, because I did it right after the snow melted, and the fire didn't go anywhere. But the local fire departments will work with you on this.
So it depends upon your locality.
Yeah, it probably
Yeah,
really does.
mine was not real supportive.
Yeah. No, mine was real supportive. So.
Most volunteer buy enough beer. Most volunteer fire departments for a small donation will come out and help you do it.
I offered that.
Did you? We did that out at Jamie Blanchard's property.
Yeah.
Small donation. They spent most of the day out there with us.
Different.
We were burning 10-acre chunks.
That's typically controlled at the township level. It depends on the township.
Yeah.
Got a question here?
Let me.
How far is the swell hole from the back end of this grass?
The what?
How far is that swell hole from the back end of this grass?
It's not too far, maybe 50 yards.
Just like on this plot here, if I was going to do it myself, and I will do something this size myself, I'll just run my tractor with my 5-foot disc around the outside edge of it, and then I'll come in. I'll make sure I got 0 to 3 mile an hour winds.
Yeah.
If I got much more wind than that, you're looking for trouble. But the thing you want to keep in mind on your property, if you've got a lot of native grasses, do it in fourths. This year I'm doing a fourth of it. Next year I'm going to do a fourth of it. The year after that I'm going to do a fourth of it, etc. So that I don't eliminate all the habitat for the birds and stuff that are nesting out in this thing right now. Switchgrass has 1.5 times the fuel in it per acre as an acre of corn. So Dan was talking about a 30-foot wall of flame. You'll see that blowing down through here in about 10 seconds, right? Yeah. So it can be overwhelming, but don't get rid of all your habitat in 1 year. They've got a patch of switchgrass right down here. I might burn this one and then go on down a little ways farther. They're compartmentalizing everything on this property, but I might leave that one stand for a year or two so that I've got some cover still there.
Other questions?
You think burning will kill all these alders off every? I would see this field just getting filled if you didn't mow them down all the time.
You know, that's a good question. When it comes to killing woody vegetation, fall burns are more effective than spring burns. Now, a lot of deer guys aren't going to want to do a fall burn. They say, hey, I want that cover there in the fall. But if you're really intent on killing the woody vegetation, you get a better, from what I'm told, you get a superior kill if you do a fall burn. And it's also easier to find people to do a fall burn for you, because during the spring, everybody wants to do a burn.
Yeah, something Dan just said there. It's the season of the burn. If you burn in the spring, you're going to create grass. If you burn in the fall, you're creating forbs. Forbs are 70% of the deer's diet in the summertime. I don't care if you got food plots or not. 70% of their diet comes out of the native vegetation you got. So if you want to change the composition right here in this field, try burning it in the fall. You're going to have more forb content in here than you do have grass content. Same thing with sprays, though. Sprays like Roundup's more effective in the fall. It's like 3 times, 4 times as more effective than it is in the spring. So if you want an area to kill, like I wanted to kill this field off here, I might mow it and various things during the year, and then come like September when it's still green, I'm going to go out there and spray that thing, and I'm going to have a lot better luck with my herbicide than I did in the spring spraying the thing. Keep that in mind.
Okay, we're going to follow Terry next. Okay, I'm going to get this started. What we're going to be entering now, we got a trail cut through some Norway spruce. This happens to be the best bedding area on the ground. It holds primarily does. This is a doe bedding area. Does hang in groups. You know, does like to sit within like all 20 yards of one another. They like to look over each other's shoulders. They're looking for danger. They like to communicate. Unlike bucks, the buck bedding area is at the end of the tour, and it's totally different. We mentioned earlier about channeling deer with water. There is a channel that's cut. This whole section, it's a 3-acre plot that heads north-south, and just on the other side of it, there's one of those channels. So he's forcing the deer to go north-south. And on the back corner, there's a huge food plot, and on the other side of that, he's got a gun blind. As we go through, look for yellow flags hanging from the trees. There's always something to look at with a yellow flag. The first thing you'll notice when we walk in here, there's a flag, and if you look to the right, he's got a tree stand. It's one of those tripod tree stands I was talking about. Trying to hunt out of the Norway spruce when they're 10, 12 foot tall, almost impossible. I know he's done a lot of ground hunting with his recurve, and when they started getting taller, he started making these tripods, and he'd get himself elevated. But he still had a lot of problems with wind and things like that. There's a tripod right there.
Yeah, that's a tripod, but this one's made out of womanized lumber. You can see what he was doing. The reason he chose, these are the first trees planted on the land too. The reason he chose Norway spruce is, one, like I said, the deer don't eat them. 2, the browse hang low. They're not like a pine where you get all the dead browse. But these are planted 8 foot apart, so you do get a lot of browse that actually did die because I think they're planted too close. But to me, that's a good thing because the does get in there and they can kind of see everyone. Just a tremendous bedding area for deer in general. So as we go through, we're going to hit like I said, the first thing you're going to come across is a yellow flag. Look to the right, you can see the stand that he was trying to use in this area. And he saw a lot of big bucks through here. You know, in the rut, the bucks will find the does, so the bucks will be running this. And then we're going to walk all the way through till we hit a T. And when we hit the T, there's a yellow flag hanging. To the right, you can walk out and look at the food plot. It's a big food plot. To the left is another one of those small, what we call kill plots, like we looked up way up front by the house. It's shaped at a 90-degree angle. And if you look this way to the west, there's a very large oak tree. His game plan was to put a tree stand in that large oak tree. It's on the fence row here. So let's go. And did I miss anything?
Quick question.
Jim?
Now, how do you access this blind that you were going to see the first one? Where do you access it from?
You know, that all depended on the wind, obviously. You know, this particular blind was set up for like a southwest wind, so he would probably come in from this way.
Gotcha.
You know, the deer are bedded in here.
Yep.
Oh, there's another thing. He's got a fence that runs east-west, and he's got a very small opening.
and he would take a stand like this and put it next to that opening. Any buck that's running down through the pines gets funneled right into the fence, and that's where his stand was. You'll see that as well.
Thermal cover?
What's that?
Thermal cover.
Oh yeah, Jim brought up, in the wintertime, the thermal benefit of the Norways is huge. The does will go in there, and when you get in there, it's amazing because it's just covered with moss, and it's just browse hanging everywhere. The deer just belly up to these Norways during the winter. Anything else I missed?
Just one thing that strikes me on this, and you can talk to Dan Timmons or Mike Hartridge about it. He's cutting trees in here that he grew from seedlings. Wow. And that's something you face when you're really a mature habitat guy, like I've been on Mike's property cutting trees down that he planted 20 years ago. It's a real thrill to see that kind of thing, that you're going from growing the trees and now you have to come in and cut them because they make so much canopy. And we're going to see a spot with oak trees.
It took me 2 hours to cut the path for walking through, and I'm thinking, 20 years ago, I was planting little seedlings this big, just wishing these trees were huge. Now they're so big, you know, I'm out here sweating. It's really amazing, because this is a forest. I mean, it really, as you get in there, it gets dark, and it's just perfect deer bedding. And like I said, primarily does, but during the rut, the bucks will go through here. Okay, let's go. The way he planted these trees, they're like I said, 8-foot spacing, and then he'd plant 2 rows and then he'd skip a row. And this is an area where he skipped a row, and between every spacing, you've got a deer run.
Yeah.
It just, and this time of the year, the deer are really not back in the area yet, in this area. I mean, because the deer, when they yard up in the winter, they travel, and this is the time of year they start coming back. So you're not going to see a lot of sign here right now. But if you look low and you see the dead limbs, and these does bed in here, and they can, as I mentioned, they watch each other, and they just, this is where the does bed.
Yeah, what he's doing is he's planting 2 rows of pines, skipping a row so you have this, and then back on.
So they're bedding in between the rows?
No, underneath the pines.
Yeah, the does.
Spotting, but this works out really well. Any deer that travels north-south, and they really have to. On that side is what I call the deer desert. It's just an open field. This side you've got the channel of water. They have to go this way, so this is a killer spot right here.
Even with a shorter fence,
speckled alder that grows so fast. That tree's probably 10 years old or less. They just grow like wildfire.
How tall are them posts?
I don't know, but what I'm trying to show here is the tree stand setup that Scott used, and he's used this for years. He doesn't have mature trees. He had 1 mature tree on this property. We'll go by it and I'll show it to you. He's got about 5 stands in that one. But this is how he developed all his tree stands. He used a 6x6 post. That thing's probably 20 foot tall. He's got it smitted in, and then he's got it anchored in with tethers on the side. And what was so key is to use the speckled alder as a backdrop so the deer don't pick you out. And this is the same type of stand that he shot his big buck out of. He's got these all over the property, and there's other type of tree stands. They look like a step ladder. They're made out of 4x4s. I want to talk about those briefly too when we get up into this area.
When do these owners?
Another thing that's interesting with 40 acres like this, when you plant it like this, it seems like you have 150. You can just keep walking and walking. It's just the cover is so good everywhere. We're probably 3/4 of the way back, but there's still all the front half and the big buck bedding area we have to talk about. I'm still going to let people catch up here.
I just crab apples too.
Yeah. You'll see a lot of crab apples through here. What's amazing about the crab apples is in the wintertime, you know, they hold berries, and they start dropping berries all fall, all winter. The deer in the winter will literally have beaten trails, and they come there every day. Like I'm talking January, February.
Yep.
They come through, and they'll pick the 5 that fell, and they go to the next tree. And you know, like 2 years ago when we had 3 foot of snow, they were passing the snow. It looked like 100 deer went down. And all they would do is go from crab apple to crab apple, just picking those crab apples. They just fall all winter. What I wanted to show here is behind us, those are oak trees that he planted. Again, those are 20 years old. And the interesting point with the oak tree is that they provide such a canopy of protecting the ground from sunlight. You get no ground cover. So if you're thinking you're going to go into a 40-acre field and plant all the oaks thinking you're going to have the best food plot in the world with acorns, you're going to have what I always call a deer desert. There's no benefit for a big buck to be under those oak trees because there's no cover. And there's more of those further in, but that's a dead end, and I don't want to get everyone tied up back there. But that's even a better example because it's a larger area, and it's just lessons learned from planting these trees that the oaks are good, but they're not that good. You don't want the oaks.
Some years they might not produce acorns anyway.
Yeah, these ones just started producing acorns. I just found my first acorns today. They are producing acorns, and they're good for the does and fawns, but
small acorns,
very small.
They're pin-oaks.
Yeah, they probably are.
I
don't know.
The turkeys and stuff. The turkeys will hammer them.
Yeah.
I'd say these trees did good for 20 years.
Yeah, they're a hybrid, and I think they were meant to grow fast.
Oh, okay.
Okay, now we're going to head back where everyone was originally walking, and we're slowly getting toward the big buck bed here.
Well, I had a bumper crop of acorns.
Let's gather in close.
I'm going to have to talk pretty loud. Okay. This is called a destination field. Can you guys in the back hear me?
Can we quiet down, please? Thanks.
If you look a little bit to the left of me, right back there is a shed. It's a blind. I think that's Chris's blind. I think that's I'm pretty sure it is. And at one time, there was nothing growing here except one tree. That big old cottonwood. See it behind me? That was the only tree. Take a look around here. The pines back there, those aren't pines. I think those are
spruce.
Those are spruce, I'm pretty sure.
Spruce.
Are they?
Norway.
Right. Every one of them was planted by Scott with a plan. This is a destination field. If you look around, there's apples over here. That's a great idea to put every kill plot you've got, every place you stand, think about putting apples. Every blind you've got, whether it's bow or firearm. And when you plant the apples, make sure there's more than one apple tree. 3 at minimum. I plant 10. And I want to make sure I have a different kind of, maybe about 6 different kinds of apples. Red Rome, Jonathan, Northern Spy, Honeycrisp, Fuji, you name it. 1 of each or 2 of each. You can't beat apples, as far as I'm concerned, as a pull-in. In fact, as I had one tree where I call it the corner blind, and last year, not apple trees didn't grow good. Apples didn't grow that great last year, but this particular one, it was so thick you can't walk near it. My blind is right next to it, and I had to hang out to the tree or else I'd stumble on those apples on the ground. I was there 2 weeks ago, there was 1 apple left. Them deer eat apples year-round, if it's available. This is a destination field. Destination field is what the deer want to go to. That's how you plant it. Now, I'm looking at this, maybe it's just a little over an acre. And you remember what people told you when you were sitting down? You want to plant variety? You remember that?
Yeah.
It was said over and over again. We're looking here, and what we're looking at is primarily clover. And it's red clover. I'm not going to bend down and pick it up. This is ladino clover. How long does ladino clover live?
Forever.
If you maintain it properly, it can live forever. How do you maintain it?
Fertilizer.
A little fertilizer, not a lot of fertilizer, but when you plant it about the 3rd year, you spray Roundup. You will not kill this clover if you spray it about this time of the year and the ground has a lot of moisture. You will not kill clover It won't kill birds-foot trefoil. It won't kill alfalfa. And I don't see any chicory here. And it won't even kill chicory. And chicory is easy to kill. But if you have a lot of moisture in the ground and you do it in the spring, you won't kill it. If you spray this stuff right here, September 15th, it'll be dead. The nutrients in the clover, all plants, are going down into the soil for next spring's green up. This, I believe, is ladino clover. How can I tell? You guys can't see it in the back there. It doesn't make any difference. If you see hair on the stem, little fuzzy hair, and underneath the leaves much bigger than this, it's probably red clover. No hair, it's probably ladino clover. White clover and ladino clover are closely related. We got here, we get red clover here and we get ladino clover. Remember we talked about, we're supposed to have a variety. Would that have improved this destination field? Back there, behind you, all the spruce, I'm told that's where the does live. Big time. To the left over here, that's where the bucks are. Do does and bucks live in the same area? They can. But I bet you that's a lot thicker than this one. You heard, I think, Jim Brocker talking about the denser it is. I think Chris was talking about the letter that Scott wrote. You want to find a buck bed? Look for the densest part of your property. That blind over there is accessed from that side. You walk along the property line, walk this way just a few feet, yards. They're there. Now they're waiting for the deer to come into this destination field. Is this a good destination field?
Yes. Yes.
Could it be improved?
Yes. Yes.
Think if you had just like strips of corn, or let's say tall grasses, and chopping this up in small little, instead of one big food plot, and you had a whole bunch of little ones, and you had run back here and then go right at that blind, and they put a strip about 10 foot wide of thick grass with switchgrass. Then I go over there and I cut another one, and I'm aiming all of them at that blind. I could have 10 different food plots in here. Can you see that? Yep. That deer could be here, and right next to him, it's 10 foot away, there's another buck there, and they don't even know it unless they can smell it. They will feel much better. And now in between these strips of switchgrass, it could be corn. What can you do? Plant something different in each one. Or you can plant a whole bunch of stuff in each one. The whole field can be done in the same kind of forage, but the forage is a blend instead of a single. But the problem is, you're not going to blend a perennial with an annual. So you're going to have strips of clover someplace, right? And on the outside, you got clover, and on the inside, you have maybe 8 or 10 different shooting lanes, and you can see all the way across. Do you think the deer would find this more to their liking? Can you shake your head like this? You can't. You're not shaking your head, sir. Okay, thank you. Anything can be improved. Anything. Access your blind as safely as you can. No one knows. You walk alongside of the property. If your neighbor doesn't see you, walk on his life. And after you get that big old buck, you just send him a thank you note. Never tell him why. It's real simple. Access your blind, total security. Leave your blind in total security, and put a variety of, and make every square foot of your kill plot. This is a great thing that Scott made. Anything can be improved, and I bet you. What would you do, sir, to improve this? Other than what I just said.
I don't know. If I did, I'd be standing where you are.
Oh. You're so modest. I bet you your mother loved you. That's my son. He's so modest. Good. All right. Now, any questions here? What would does anybody here have an idea? What would you do to improve it? I think I can see your eyes just glistening with intelligence.
Ed put a strip of switchgrass down the middle, another strip of switchgrass across this way. So you have 4 plots. Bucks can't see each other. You don't panic. They feel safe.
That's right. Yell it to these guys back here.
Did you hear it?
No, I didn't hear you. Say it again.
Put switchgrass down the middle, and across halfway across you have 4 plots. When the bucks can't see each other, they feel safe on the field. They're not threatened. So the more ways you can divide it up and make sure you feel safe, the more you're going to see.
How wide is it?
And arrange that switchgrass so you can see the deer.
10 foot be plenty. Down here, switchgrass grows much better than up north. So we do have switchgrass up north in places that guys have divided their property up and it works. Sorghum works too.
All right. If you want to improve on, thanks, Mr. Clay. No wonder you're an attorney. In the middle of this, dig a pond. Surrounded with switchgrass so the deer take the pond, take the dirt, and build it all the way around. Make it as high as you can. Flatten the top off, and you plant around that. You planted switchgrass. They're going to be bedding right in that area, in the middle of your kill plot. Do you think I said it right? Water's important, but take the dirt you take out of the ground to make the water whole, keep it there, and just raise up the land a little bit and plant switchgrass right on top of that. And if you really want to pull them deer in, see those spruce over there? Put some spruce in there. They can look at, holy cow, it's like an oasis. Do something to bring the deer in to you. You don't want to have to go after the deer. We all know experts in the deer hunting community. And what do they tell you? If I went to a place that was giving a seminar on the best way of hunting, what will the experts tell you? Most of them will say this: go after the deer. Am I right?
Right.
What do I say to that? Bull. Make the deer come to you. You set your property up. Remember the Godfather, Marlon Brando? What did he tell his son when his son had a problem with one of his associates? He said, make them an offer they can't refuse. Give these deer something they can't refuse. It's just that simple. They will come to you. What do you plant? Has anybody ever read my article, The Sweetening Thing?
Yep.
Yes. Okay. Now it's your job now to tell everybody else. You're going out there and you're sweetening it. You're literally doing nothing but putting fertilizer, this nitrogen fertilizer, to make the plants literally sweeter than anybody else's on your property. Get on our website, deerattraction.com, print out the sweetening thing, and starting to September the 15th, do the sweetening thing, and you'll see something different. They're even going to eat grass. Do deer eat grass?
Yes.
They do?
Not their preferred food.
They do. Spring and fall. Walk out in the woods in the springtime after a tough fall. You won't see a blade of grass eaten by the deer, and the deer are dying. They do not eat dead brown grass, but they'll eat clover that's dead and brown. If all deer had to eat was grass, they would die. Every one of them. If all cows had to eat with grass, they'd live forever. It's just that simple.
Someone once wrote deer, not cows.
They got 4 stomachs, and that's about all the difference is. So all I can tell you is variety, make it sweet, and make the deer feel so secure, as you said, Tim. Make it so secure that the deer feels safe. We got a new DVD. I'm not pushing it because it's not important for me. I'm 80 years old. I'm retired. I was an engineer. I owned an engineering company for 33 years. I'm okay. I'm doing this because I like to do this. And you're going to learn a lot over time. And most of you are going to learn the things that you found by mistakes. I'm sorry, you don't make mistakes. Okay, one last time. Destination field, it's a good one. It can be improved. Everything can be improved.
Okay, this area here is just, it's nothing more than another kill plot where you can see the stand there. Christy actually shot a buck out of here 2 years ago, out of that stand. And you can see the cover, you know, a deer a big buck can come into this plot, it can eat, and it's 2 steps away from cover. And you can look at the stem density in here, very thick. You can hardly walk through it, but you can see these deer trails. You walk through these deer trails and it's just laced with rubs. Again, this time of the year, there's very few deer here right now. We've been back here for a solid week. That doesn't help matters. This is the time of the year the deer are coming back. And this, yep. And then this will, you know, the deer use this in a big way. I don't know if anyone has any questions. That kind of concludes my portion of the tour. Now we're going to go to the buck bedding area, which is pretty much the highlight of the show, in my opinion. Sure.
It's just regular office paper. It decomposed in the spring when the rains came and just kind of fell down, and that's how he protected a lot of these trees so that they were able to grow. The other thing too is he's got a low deer density here, or did, when he was planting them, and he really overwhelmed them, but he still had some browse, and that's what he did to protect them in the first few years until they got up where the deer couldn't really reach them.
I think he also talked about the trick with the egg and a Ziploc bag.
Yeah.
Do you recall that
Yeah.
one?
Yeah, there was he experimented with a lot of different things to keep the deer off of them. But I noticed when I was walking through, when you guys were on the other side, that there are a couple of white pines in here. Those bucks, when they don't have a lot of white pines, they usually just demolish white pines. But I see a couple of them are growing. But
Right.
I don't know how he planted, if he planted in any number.
He didn't plant many at all.
Yeah.
We'll take maybe this core group can go through, but I'll tell the significance of the spot from what I read to you guys. This is that little hideaway spot. If you notice, screening on both sides. There's a moat around the back. You'll see it when we get in there with an escape route out the moat. It's high. It offers a visual sight line for the bucks over a food plot. You can see how he was able to access the stand. There's a stand right over here. The night he killed that buck, he waited till the 8th of October before he ever went out. He waited for that perfect wind. He crept in here. He crept up that stand all the time the buck's laying in here less than 50 yards from me. Well, when the bucks get up that early season, they're not pressured yet. You see the room they have to do their licking branch, to feel their oats, if you will. They don't feel pressured. They don't feel like they're out in a food plot yet. They're still in cover or seclusion. They feel safe here. And that's how he's able to take these bucks early season. Now that would be his gun blind, but the same scenario there. He's got a beautiful white clover food plot that offers seclusion. He's had bucks midday during gun season feeding in this because they just feel safe here. So anyways, when you walk through, you see some yellow ribbons. Those are deer beds. And you always notice they're underneath overhanging branches, stereotypical what you'd expect out of a deer bed. Mostly buck groups, social groups will bed here every year. Ironically, we don't get big activity here till about around June when they start showing their horns. And then the rest of the summer, they're here all year. And the bigger bucks will take this over completely.
Where are they?
A good question, because the deer do not yard here.
I know in the thumb they'll travel long distances in the winter.
Yeah, these deer, he doesn't have a big presence of yarding deer here. But he'll have a huge influence of social buck, young bachelor groups all summer. And come bow season, he sees a buck every time he comes out. Where I hardly can see any deer tracks right now. But I know how this place goes. It's just how it evolves every year. So, I mean, I can't answer that question. I just know come back in October and you'll know what we're talking about. But let's take a decent-sized group, whatever we think we can make, and we'll walk this little loop. Just pay attention to how it looks and how secluded it is, and that's really the key.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty tight quarters, so
About half of you go and half of you. That's always a problem when you have new properties that don't have a tree in a perfect spot. That thing's anchored in the ground on somewhat of a foundation. It's held up by, you can see how it's constructed, and it works fine. And he's got the Norway spruce, not so he's not silhouetted.
The road, you feel like you're a mile off the road. You know, you have that sense of, you know, remote.
Look at the seclusion stuff we have better here. There's the protection from the moat, if you will. We got the heavy screen here. And right just past that tree is an escape route if they want to cross this moat. And when he shot that buck, it's exactly what he did. He run right out through that escape route. And ironically, until he filled that in, he didn't have that many deer in here. They felt trapped. Not that they can't cross that at will, but it's 10 feet deep. So he filled it in, and it made for that became much more appealing to the deer. They use it. They'll be back this summer for sure.
These are awesome.
No, I think he got it closer to the edge. Oh, that's a true monarch. We only have 10 to 15 deer per square mile in this area. So it's always a challenge. But every closer groups of bucks, you can't give them a 3-acre bedding area. You'll just fill that with does and fawns. They want these little out-of-the-way places that may only amount to a half of an acre. They don't want to see another doe near them. They don't even really like each. You get to the rut, they won't even tolerate each other. You guys know that. But throughout the summer, these little hidey holes, as I call them, out of the way. The does don't. The does are over in them pines. Easy access, a lot of room. That's where they live. Bucks, they're more seclusive. They'll stay in this little hidey hole, and they'll feel safe. And what I think is so neat about it, and he's seen it happen 100 times, you're the first week of October, these bucks are up an hour before daylight, and they're out here eating clover and working these licking branches and feeling completely safe. They haven't left yet. They still feel like they're in their beds. Even though they've stepped and moved 20 yards, they're waiting for pitch dark to make the move out to the food plot. All the while, he manages to have a setup that allows him to creep in on top of them. And the night he killed this buck, we had about a 10-mile-an-hour west wind. It wasn't much, but it was a steady wind. And I remember seeing him the week before at a football game, and I said, "You haven't been out yet?" He said, "I'm just waiting for the perfect wind." He saw this buck out of the gun stand as a 3.5-year-old with his daughter with a crossbow. And so he knew this buck hung out here. He thought about him all year. We hung up that ladder stand there to set up on him for a gun kill. And the first night he ever hunted that stand, the 8th of October, when the wind was perfect, I got a text that night. I own property a mile from here, and the text said I got him. And so I knew what that meant, but it was a pretty special night to think that this property was nothing at one time, and now he was managed. And then 2 weeks later or a month later, he killed another one almost as nice. But anyway, I hope you guys have gotten something out of this. But for some of you guys have deer densities that we would dream of having. So I imagine what a scenario like this would be in an area with heavy deer density. But a lot of you guys around this area know what I'm talking about. We just don't have a lot of deer.
But you can't have this with the deer density because
they destroy it. I hear that. See, Scott and I aren't used to that. We hear people say that deer eat speckled alder. What are you talking about? They eat it. Yeah, I'm told they do. And in our world, they don't eat it because there's so much food here that. So, you know, there's challenges all the time. It depends on your area, but.
How do you dictate where you're going in the buck?
If you were to take and clear cut 2 solid acres in your hardwood forest, just take 2 acres of it and cut every tree down. Do you have an existing forest to start with?
Oh, predominantly oak.
Okay.
Mature oak.
You cut an acre out of that, or an acre and a half, or 2 acres, you will fill it with those. You will, because it'll be an explosion of cover. It'll be easy access. It won't be interesting to the mature bucks. And I know it sounds crazy, but it won't be.
if you built a little tiny quarter of an acre spot away from the does in some place like this, if you could manage to create it, that's where your bucks would go. Does aren't fussy. Give me big, easy access. Give me a stadium, if you will. I mean, if I took you to my property that's a mile away from here. I got a 2-acre major bedding area. It is filled with does and fawns every year. I'm not saying that a young year-and-a-half-old buck won't bed on the edges, but you get into mature animals, nuh-uh. They don't. They don't mix with the does. They find places like this that aren't too big, that offer all these features. If they can find, they find the best cover in their area. Screen, both sides. You probably can't hear my big mouth yelling if you're on the other side of them pines. It's so, we feel like we're in a room right now, don't you? Yeah. You kind of feel like you're inside of a gymnasium or you're in a secret place no one knows about. That's how these bucks feel safe here. I mean, when they step out here, they're still not stepped out in their eyes. They still think they're safe. So how do you create that scenario? When he first did this, the screening, the center was a food plot. That was a big open food plot. Very little activity. It was too open. So he run these speckled alders in rows. He was going to put food plots between them, try to make some cover. Well, what happened is they grew up so fast, he started getting volunteers coming up inside, and he started noticing the bucks just started living in there. He's like, well, something about this they like, let's enhance it. So he backed off the feeding program, and he turned it into a bedding area. And it just grew from there. This was his core area every year that he had. He at least had sightings and encounters every year in this area. But like I said, you come back in a month and this will be littered with deer sign. You come back in September, this place will be rubbed up and, they're ready to roll again. And come rut, guess what, guys? These bucks leave. It becomes a bigger challenge for him. Come the first week of November, there's so little does on this property that the bucks tend to leave. So he did most of his work after rut and before rut. That's when he killed his deer.
What had changed? Why did the does leave?
There's not a lot of them here to begin with. And what happens is the bucks are just wandering for hot does. They're, when you've got 9-to-1 buck to doe ratio, guess what? The 5 or 6 or 10 that are in heat are taken care of in a hurry, and the rest of the bucks are just out looking and they're gone. And them are legit numbers, 9-to-1. His sightings, bucks to does. Bucks. He would go 5 or 6 hunts, see a deer every hunt, and never see a doe. Common with Scott. What'd you see tonight, Scott? 2 year-and-a-half, and a nice 2.5. Never sees a doe. I mean, rare. They're here, but just doesn't see a lot of it. So, I mean, that's not an interesting thing. That's why I mentioned that. He has so much dense cover here, I think it's more attractive to bucks in general. It's just my opinion. I could be wrong. My land is open timber that I created bedding areas in, like what you're describing, mostly oaks, and it's just the opposite. I started out with all these does and a few bucks. Well, I've worked hard to create a scenario similar to this, and took a massive amount of timber off 2 years ago. And last year was the first year I was able to control a buck on my land and get film of him every time I checked my trail cameras. He was there, and I killed him on the 12th. He's not on that board. He's at the taxidermist now, but a 20-inch wide 8-point, 3.5-year-old buck, which is a tremendous animal for around here, all because of the cover. So it really boils down to cover in general. I don't think anybody can go wrong by cutting trees down. Even if you don't have a plan, you're better off than leaving what you have now. You'll find that out in a hurry. Anyways, if we can keep moving the majority that way, and maybe I'll get the next one. I don't know if anybody has any questions right now. You shot it from the stand. Right from that stand right there.